The week after that, her lead character would be married and pregnant, and there would be a whole disgustingly cheery episode revolving around diapers and baby food. Well, they could take their blasted market research and stuff it. Aloud, she said none of this. Exercising what she considered to be Emmy Award-winning restraint, she murmured pleasantly, "Now, you run along and explain that to Mr. Compton, dear. I'm sure he'll understand." "Understand what?" The question, asked in a low, velvet-smooth tone, came from the back of the studio. It was exactly the sort of warm, soothing, sensual voice that radio stations like to have on the air in the wee hours of the morning to stir the imagination of their female listeners. Despite her instinctive, sinking feeling that the voice belonged to Michael Compton, Barrie's own heart lurched at the seductive sound. Then it had a far more sensible reaction. It slammed against her ribs in sheer panic. Michael Compton, the recently appointed network vice president for programming, was a man who reportedly dissected into tiny, insignificant pieces the people who dared to question his orders. Barrie wondered how much of her conversation with Kevin he'd overheard. Not that she'd change a word of it, she thought stoutly. It would just be nice to know exactly how much trouble she was in. She had to admit that the man's timing was impeccable. Just when I've got the battle under control, the enemy general has to show up with reinforcements, she muttered resignedly under her breath. She should have anticipated something like this. The day had not gone well since the alarm clock had jarred her awake at daybreak. In fact, on a scale of 1 to 10, it ranked somewhere on the minus side of the ledger. First, she had inadvertently washed one of her new soft contact lenses down the drain, leaving her to choose between blinking nearsightedness or the huge, old, rose-tinted glasses that made her look a bit like an owl. Then her hairdryer had sparked and sizzled to an abrupt halt, leaving her frosted ash-brown hair to dry naturally to a curly tangle, rather than the smoother style she preferred. Her windshield wipers had broken in the middle of a downpour, and she'd had to creep along the LA freeway, arriving at the studio an hour late. And finally, she had snagged her new hose as she was getting out of her sporty fire engine red Sentra in the parking lot. The run had made its way from her ankle to her thigh in less time than it had taken her to utter a satisfying string of obscenities under her breath. "Apparently I'm on a roll," she said dryly, as the man whom she assumed to be Michael Compton stepped out of the shadows and strolled confidently to the temporary office set of Goodbye Again, where Barrie and the cast were assembled. They had been rehearsing the premiere episode when Kevin had wandered in with the latest memo from the network. "Well, Miss MacDonald," the man said, a hint of amusement twinkling in his eyes, as he perched on the edge of the conference table right next to her. One very solid, very tempting thigh was mere inches from her fingertips. "Exactly what is it you're so sure I'll understand?" Barrie's gaze shifted reluctantly upward, into dazzling blue-green eyes. She studied the square jaw and the determined set to his mouth and gulped. Perhaps a dog wouldn't be so bad after all. He could stay in the bedroom and bark occasionally. That ought to keep everyone happy. "What in God's name am I thinking of?" she snapped back mentally. "I will not have a dog in this show." Staring him straight in the eye, she said coolly, "We were just discussing your memo, Mr. Compton." "About the sheepdog?" "Yes, I'm not sure you've thought this through," she began cautiously, wincing as his eyes hardened and bored into her. Mincemeat. This was definitely a man who made mincemeat out of his adversaries. She rushed on anyway. If she was going to commit professional suicide, she might as well go out fighting. "I mean, these people live in a 35-story condominium in the middle of Manhattan. What would they be doing with a sheepdog?" "That's something else we need to talk about," he said. Although he spoke softly, there was